We're here today with Senator Ronald L. Rice of Newark, veteran senator, and thank you for joining us, sir.
Thank you very much for having me. It's always a pleasure to be in your company, whether it's in person or Zoom, Max, you know that, or even telephone conversation. We really appreciate the work you do as a journalist in New Jersey. Unlike many other journalists, you always try to speak truth to power and really let the public know what we're really saying without really doing a lot of editing to it. So we really appreciate you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Well, I'd like to get your thoughts on the verdict yesterday, and we did speak yesterday, Senator, and you did say that it's time for New Jersey to get its act together, and you've spent a long career fighting the establishment in this state, and notably fighting the establishment in a particularly concerted way over the last year and a half or so. And I'd like to get your thoughts on what you meant exactly by New Jersey getting its act together.
So the verdict yesterday, I believe, was the right verdict for a lot of reasons. Being a former police officer, I'm not a lawyer, but I attended law school, so I do understand some things about the law and the court system and how that operates. I think the prosecutor did a yeoman's job in presenting the evidence and making it very simple for the jury to come to that conclusion. However, if the young lady never took the video, I'm not sure where we'll be today. And so yesterday's verdict was really not a verdict for George Floyd. It was really a verdict for the country and all those folks before George Floyd who never got justice. And hopefully a verdict for future justice when we have those kinds of situations. But the reality is that the verdict in and of itself was really justice, a just decision, and justice being provided to the case of George Floyd by the members of the jury, who really did a good job listening and paying attention. The prosecutor did a good job with the expert witnesses, and even police officers finally stepping up to the plate to purge their own system and let folks know, look, we're in blue, like I used to be, I'm a former cop, we're in blue. Yes, there's some degree of code, but that code only goes so far. The stuff that this officer did, the police could not even tolerate. And it certainly wasn't part of the training, regardless of what the defense attorney said. And so what does all this mean? It means that once again, the jury members deliver a justice system, a just decision. So there was justice there for George Floyd case. There was not justice for the world, in this case, New Jersey, the country. We need a justice system that's going to be just. And so if people forget about George after a few years and the system remained the same here in New Jersey and elsewhere, then there's a problem. And so my years of service working for the Legislative Black Caucus and members of the legislature in general has always been to focus on reformation, on reforms in different areas that was necessary, reform for women who have been denied so much for so many years, reform for people of color and minorities that's been denied for so many years. And so as a Black Caucus, we pushed through a lot of criminal justice reformation and reform bills. Some got diluted or changed by the governor and the AG, but our mission stays focused. There are other bills that we're trying to get through that need to get through. If you're going to have true criminal justice systems reform and reformation, then you have to have oversight. In my opinion, being a former police officer, as much as the cops' leadership, not the members of the police forces, because we always talk to leadership, don't like it, we need these community review boards. Now, how we set them up to make sure it's fairness and equity, I think is important. And the reason we need them is because some of the things that happen, such as the Floyd case, may not have happened that way because there was oversight and the experience and information coming from incidents get transitioned back to officers so they don't do this repeat the same mistakes in the future. And so
Senator, what's the status of that civilian review board now? There were some legal battles waged last year. What's the status?
well, if I remember, it's in court. I don't know what happened with the court. I think the mayor of the city of Newark and others went to court with it. We have the legislation and committee that we're trying to pull up. And so I guess it's pending what's coming out of the courts. But that's just one bill. There are other bills too. For example, when you look at a just criminal justice system, you can't just think about policing and courts and prosecutors, defense attorneys. You have to think about the things that cause crime in the first place. The things that cause us to have this need for law enforcement. And we're going to always have a need for law enforcement. I support that because we live in a society that demands social order and demand that their values and cultures be protected, the good ones, and to make sure that we put down the negative subcultural values that come along with these special interest groups or young people, et cetera, who feel no love, have no opportunities. And so a just criminal justice system calls for reformation. Yes, it calls for reformation to have civilian review boards. It called for things like reparation, a look at that and what that means in a relationship to the criminal justice system. But it really calls for all the inequities that's been against people of color and women for so many years. The lack of affordable housing, the lack of jobs for our young people in particular and our adults, the lack of a quality education within our communities, unlike other communities, and all those kinds of things, the lack of affordable housing or housing ownership, equitable pay. These are issues that's been plaguing us for a number of years, and it's very interesting because the reparation bill we're trying to put through is similar to what the Johnson administration did with the Kearns Commission. It said, take a look at some of the things that's impacting the communities that's creating these problems. That's what it's really saying. And then let's come back and talk about how we can fix them, if we can fix them. And that's all we asked for, but the bill is stalled. And so once again, yesterday, verdict was members of the jury providing justice to the Floyd case. But now in New Jersey, we need a system of justice. And it's going to be incumbent upon the Legislative Black Caucus. And as you know, I stepped down as the chair and mentored and brought Siobhan DeSuntho up as the new chairperson. And she has a good team. But it's going to be important that the Black Caucus remain strong in their mission and convictions, regardless of the politics, and fight to get these bills through. If that means educating the Senate president, if it means educating more so, educating again, and he's doing a good job working with us, the speaker, we need to do that. But if it means fighting them collectively because they understand the need, but special interest being a barrier and they're trying to balance that and they can't balance it, then we need to push forward.
Well, that's what I want to get into, because it seems to me that this establishment will rejoice at the opportunity to go out and march in the streets, and yet find itself completely impaired by the structure that will, again, put forward legislation into committee that then dies and never reaches the floor of the Senate. And you talked about it last year, a number of bills, including minority recruitment for law enforcement and other social justice bills that never see the light of day. And my question, sir, is whether you believe the establishment wants to have it both ways and only undertake half measures or chew around the edges or participate in marches, but ultimately really can't get it done because it's part of the same structure that the same political structure really that empowers the police as we know it in this state. And to go against that would mean that a lot of these people would lose re-election.
Well, you're right. And to me, it's always been very clear where the Republicans as a party and the majority of my colleagues stand on social justice issues impacting people who have the least middle-class workers, and low-wage income earners. That's always been clear to us. You can even look at the party. They finally got a black assemblyman, one of our members, but for years they just wouldn't do that. Okay. If you look at the arguments we have, they always find some reason to say, yes, we're with that, but you have to modify it this way. Recognize that if we modify the way they say, it doesn't accomplish anything. In fact, many times it does more pain to women and minorities in our communities. And so that's the education process, et cetera. I always tell the governor and legislature that we don't like being patronized. And the governor, got offended with me and said, I don't like the word patronism. I said, well, I know what it means. You don't like it, but that's what it is. When someone tells us they're going to do something and it's the feel good stuff, we with you on that. That's a great decision yesterday. This should have come a long time ago. Well, you know what? We're going to need that decision again if you don't pass some of these bills that we have in a hopper. And then when we do pass bills, Max, the administration, Christie administration, those that come before, if they don't dilute the bills, they don't enforce the bills. Let me give you an example. When you talk about reformation and how to reduce crime by providing opportunities and quality housing and jobs and things like that, I passed a bill many years ago, which is still law. 1/2 or 1% of construction contracts in the state of New Jersey is supposed to go into apprenticeships programs for women and minorities. It's not happening. The money is being collected. If it should be collected, as the law said it has to, then the question is, where's the money going? I passed a bill several years ago, and I got to put new bills in that says that 1/2 or 1 cent from the paint money that came in. I didn't raise the taxes. I just said 1/2 or 1% of a penny on the tax we had at the time will go to abating the lead problems in these houses. That penny, we expect to raise about $14 million. The first year, it raised over 20 million. And they capped and said, we'll give you so much. But then the Christie administration started putting in general revenues. So I'm thinking that these houses that poor people and struggling people living in, that the pain has been abated. And it has not been. And so then we have a compounded problem because we have to provide health care for folk with lead poisoning, and some even die, that we should not have to had to provide in the first place. And so it's all about feel good, but it's about the vote. And people feel that they can come into the Black community, the minority community, urban communities where you have culturally disadvantaged whites, okay? It's not just all about Blacks, it's about economics, et cetera, and where we live, and just patronize us, et cetera, and get the votes, to go with the votes that they have in order to win the elections. And then we have to argue. And so it's been a struggle. And then I get questioned by the Senate President and others. He doesn't question me anymore because he knows how I am, but why am I so adamant and so outspoken? And why do I challenge the leadership? Well, I challenge leadership when it comes to the president and the speaker and the governor is because the Constitution said that we are co-equal members of government. And the only reason the president is the president with the powers is because we vote for him to be that. But I'm still not his subordinate. The only reason to speak is the speaker because the members vote for him to be that or her to be that. We still not subordinate. The governor is the governor. And so they want to subordinate our positions and they like to divide Black folk. If you look at the New Jersey State Legislature, they are favorites in the Black caucus of leadership. And there are those who are not favorites of the leadership. And that's the division in of itself. But we don't allow them to really totally take us down. We take advantage of it to get some things accomplished.
Sir, I'd like to ask you a little bit about the marijuana legislation that passed. And obviously you fought for decriminalization from the beginning. You were the leading voice for decriminalization in this state. You also expressed real reservations about how this would be misused against poor communities. And ultimately you voted for the bill, but was there a bit of bait and switch there with leadership, particularly in the area of allocating monies generated by marijuana sales to impoverished communities to help them. There's no mechanism to guarantee, getting back to your legislation that you said for some time dedicated those monies, but then it went into the general fund. Isn't that what's going to happen here? 70% of revenues were guaranteed at the outset to be put into minority businesses and programs that would benefit urban populations. But how does that money stay there? Can't they just find a way to put it elsewhere in the years ahead?
Yes, they always find a way to put it elsewhere, but to his credit, Senator Singleton did a good job arguing for that 70%, because as we looked at the dollars and cents, there was talk about how do we do that, and they were telling us that 70% of this or 70% of that. We said we want the 70%, but we also wanted some of the sales tax and other dollars, et cetera. But then we said, well, we don't want it on certain things. It has to be across the board. So whatever you bring in, we want the 70%, because before, it was like, okay, if we get it, you don't get it, you have so much, et cetera. Where we go with that, and even the mayors now, I'm really concerned about some of the urban mayors, and to be quite frank, some of the Black mayors, because I haven't had a lot of conversation with them, and I was supposed to have one with them. But I see, for example, in Orange, the legislature is saying how wonderful it is. They're going to probably do some marijuana legislation, and money's going to go to the kids, and money's going to go to the community. I'm not so sure if that's true, because what that means is that either you're going to put a facility up there to grow marijuana or to manufacture it or distribute it, and you may be able to find some land, even though it's a small community, to do that without impacting the community and provide the jobs. But the monies that they talk about urban communities really making is coming from the gummy shops and the smoke shops that you're starting to see pop up already. I guess they're laying base in urban communities. And so then you tell me you don't want decriminalization, you don't want police officers held accountable, you don't want the body cam on when they approach young people, you want to do station house adjustment, and we said no to that because the kids is hanging, and I'm not even talking about the older kids, we're talking about those young people who are 9, 10, 11, 12 years old that have a joint they picked up on the sidewalk or took something off the table, who are on the streets right now, on the corners. But they're standing in front of vacant buildings and vacant storefronts. And you're complaining about that kid now, but yet you pass legislation that says that the kid who's presently in the public eye on the streets in front of a vacant store is going to still be the same kid in front of the vacant store when it become occupied with this marijuana paraphernalia, cupcake, candy, and drops. That doesn't help us direct the kid. That just kind of enhanced the kid's attitude about being out there, and that the product itself is not really bad for them, et cetera. And so these are the conversations that we try to have, but we can't have them the way we want to have them in Trenton because there's pushback or we're cut off. I just don't like the Trenton system. If I had my way, and I said this publicly, there's a lot of legislators over the years I would have just punched out. Physically punched them out for being so stupid and so biased. There are others who come along who get educated, even though they don't take the position we do, they want to know more and they do help. But it's just frustrating, and that's why you have the floor type of situations, and that's why people take to the streets. And by the way, the jury deliberations and the verdict was one that impacted not only the country, but it impacted the international community, because the floor case, if you recall, the demonstrations were international. And what it was saying is that this is not about Floyd. We're tired of being treated this way by a handful of select folk who want to play God with these titles, or a bunch of rich money folk who want to support legislators who will rubber stamp their crap. And there come a time where we have to speak out on it, and it shouldn't just be the street speaking out on it. I think that legislators, Black, white, and Latino, should have enough fortitude, regardless of what relationship they have with the parties that they represent, with the political bosses that's there and remind them we're not against you. That's why we're part of the party. We bring something to the table, but we're not taking this crap, and you're going to listen to us too. Whether you want to or not, you're going to
Well,
listen.
this is what I see, Senator. To your point, I see a legislative leadership that preoccupies itself with restructuring Horizon and spends a lot of time on that. Spends a lot of time securing a helicopter pad for its politically connected pals, while a city, Camden, is closing down another supermarket, and the people there are living in squalor. And I think occasionally we see, for the sake of a headline or the sake of a press release, a bill that looks good that dies in committee, like residency requirements for law enforcement, or like the expungement piece in marijuana legislation, which you fought for from the beginning. I don't see expungement in that final legislation. I see a series of political hoops that a person has to jump through. And if it's anything like trying to get the vaccine, what it means is if you're politically connected, maybe you can get that record expunged or sealed, but it's going to take a process. And so, yes, I would agree that it does not appear that this current structure has in its forefront the people, and certainly the people who are suffering the worst scourge of the systemic racism that you fought against your entire career.
But you're right, and even and that I not only have I fought for. I've always represented a very diverse community. I've represented some of the wealthiest people, and still do, in this state. The poorest people, the middle class, those that I believe. So I've had diversity in economics in terms of representation, race, gender, etc. And that gives me balance because I do understand. And even the wealthy communities have needs. The needs are somewhat different, but even then we play games. Let me give you the most recent example. I represent Glen Ridge, which is a very wealthy community. And they don't actually pay for much of anything at all. Maybe a little help with the school system, and they just handle that on their own. But the governor just passed, said that students now, 16 above, students can actually get vaccination now, and we're encouraging that. And at least he's encouraging it. And he's trying to get his numbers up to the numbers he wanted to meet, right? So it was brought to my attention by Democrats, to be quite frank about it, Democratic Club leadership, Charlie Breslin, and Glen Ridge, that this is a wonderful thing. And the county of Essex is leading probably the country in terms of how they're handling this. They're really doing a yeoman job under Joe D, working with the mayors. But the students can only take the Pfizer vaccine. So in Glen Ridge, so far, the only thing available is Moderna. So you say you want the kids to take the vaccine so they can get back in school, but you're not providing the Pfizer vaccine. So the concept was, which is a good one, and seemed to me to be a very easy one, is why don't we just bring some Pfizer into Glen Ridge by mobile unit, right? So I got in touch with the state, and they spoke to Mr. Breslin on my behalf. And as it stands right now, it appears as though they can't do anything. Well, I don't understand why you can't do anything if you have Pfizer sitting in the stockpile. All you have to do is move it. I'll come get it. You know what I'm saying? It's that kind of rhetoric that doesn't make any sense. And that's not the governor saying we can't do it. It's the governor giving it to its administrators to look at, and they'll come back and saying we can't do it. Now, I don't know if there's a law preventing it. I don't know if they don't have a vehicle to get it done, but the question should be, is it necessary to do? Yes, it is. If you want young people to get this vaccination, they can only get Pfizer. Then our job is to find a way to get it into Glen Ridge and elsewhere in the state where young people can't get Pfizer.
When you look at the current schedule, where do you hope to make an attack now with this kind of momentum in the nation for these issues, for these reform issues that you've been fighting for your entire life, starting with police reform?
So we're going to stay focused. You know, this is an election year for New Jersey, and some of us have opposition, some of us don't. And I'm speaking about members of the Legislative Black Caucus right now in particular, and Latino caucus. I'm not speaking for them, but they're in the same boat we're in. We're going to collectively stay focused on the reformation bills that we have in and talk about other legislation that is necessary, because we can't administrate. Our job is to write the law. I remember one time someone said, well, we're going to limit the number of bills you can put in. I said, you can't do that without a challenge. I'll take you to court. And the reason I'll take you to court, because the Constitution says I'm a legislator. Okay, so I write bills. I can't do anything else. So you can't limit, okay? It's bad enough you hold my bills up, okay? And don't get them heard, or hold them up once they get to the board to be voted on. But we're going to stay focused on reformation, because our work over the years that I've been chair has been to organize Black people, Black leaders. And I'm talking about Black elected officials statewide. So we have an organization, and we can identify Black elected officials from school board to Congress. The group that we put together is North New Jersey Black Elected Official Policy Alliance, not political policy, because we don't care about your politics, whether you're Republican or Democrat. We care about common grounds on policies impacting our communities throughout the state. And that's why I'm always telling the administration, hold it. You make sure that Assemblyman McClellan is just a part of whatever is taking place. You talk to him. It's nice to talk to his senators. You talk to him and get the Black perspective down there in that Republican county, okay, and in his district. So we're going to stay focused on those things, et cetera. And the reason we have to do that is because not only did we bring together Black elected officials, we always had a faith-based group of over 300 clergy, but we meet regularly, meaning the Legislative Black Caucus. We continue to meet regularly with the Association of Black Women Lawyers, the Garden State Bar Association, which is the Black lawyers, the New Jersey Medical Association, which is the Black doctors, the New Jersey Black Issues Convention, which is our advocacy group, the New Jersey Fair Housing Center, et cetera, which is our housing group, the Institute for Social Justice, which does a lot of research for us and a lot of important things, working with the various national organizations and in Brenner Center and places like that. We also meet, with the state conference of NAACP, et cetera. So these are our coalition, civil rights coalition partners. And I may have left one out, urban leagues, people like that. But so we've been working on policy. So when we bring these bills up before the legislature, it's not that Ron Rice or Assemblywoman Conaway or someone just jump up one morning and just say, I'm going to put a bill in. This is coming directly from our collective wisdom based on what we know statewide, because we're all over the state, these organizations and the members, and what our constituency base are telling us. I didn't call the governor about mobilizing Pfizer into Glen Ridge because I got one morning and said, well, Glen Ridge probably needs some mobilization. I got that from a constituent, which made sense. If it didn't make sense, I would have told him that. So now we got to figure out how to make it happen.
Understood. Well, when you say it's an election year, unfortunately, what occurs to me is that the legislature will appear to be doing a lot of things and appear to be talking about important issues, and then these will stop before they create any unnecessary commotion around the elections, and then perhaps they'll die next year when the game is changed. Am I being too cynical, Senator?
No, you're not being cynical. And unfortunately, the way our systems are set up throughout the country is that, in this case, Senator Sweeney, the Senate President, and the Assembly Speaker, Corcoran, control a lot of money. And I'm talking about political money, okay, through PACs and things like that. And so as a result of that, some of the groups that we're fighting back on contribute. And so they have to try to bring balance. I get that. And we have to try to do the same thing, but we don't get those kinds of contributions as individual legislators. I'm not in leadership. Sometimes chairs will get something close to it because the leadership will push that on, et cetera. But at the end of the day, they control those kinds of things. And so the reason I raised that is because while we're talking about policy or reformation, they're already quietly and have for some time been talking about reapportionment. Reapportionment, if it's done wrong, it's going to hurt members of the legislative Black caucus, Latino caucus, women, etc. But they have the resources to do that on the sideline while they give us the apple pie motherhood stuff about how wonderful the decision was with George Floyd, okay? And I try to, because I can't do this forever. I've been doing a lot of years. I try to educate my caucus members about how to pay attention to this, the younger people, is that while you're going one way, you have to have some peripheral vision, okay? Because there are things happening with folk in government, in the party, and people in leadership that's going to impact you one way or the other. It may be good, it may be bad, but you need to know it's there while you listen to their apple pie talk.
Well, Senator, listen, I appreciate your time today, and I certainly appreciate all the time, the years of service, and also the opportunity to cover the work that you do, the vital work in this state. And I want to thank you for your service to our country, sir, and for your service to this state. And I look forward to our next interaction.
Well, I appreciate it too. And I just want to close by saying that the one thing I try to also get the new members of the legislature to recognize, because I spent 16 years on council for as deputy mayor and all these years in the legislature, is that a lot of money is pouring in here right now. We passed a lot of bills to help a lot of people in the federal government, and a lot of it's going to get wasted, I believe. I hope it does not. But even then, on the little things that we need, for example, we're trying to get the camp that Irvington owns up in another township up and running. We've been trying to do that. We passed and put on the governor's desk a resolution for about $4 million to do the restoration stuff so we can get these kids off the street. We got marijuana coming in, yet that got pushed back because of COVID-19. Well, there was no restoration of those funds, but there was restoration of other funds for quote unquote some of the white community or white leadership that needed it. So we're working with the office now trying to get that done. But the point I'm making is that there are times in government when we have surpluses and we have dollars and we have to fight to even get little small programs in. Then there are times we don't have a lot of dollars. And I tell the members of the legislature, when the speaker and the Senate president and the governor tell us they can't help us because we have a deficit, I said, no. Don't focus on the deficit. Let them know that we would help them to address the deficit. But deficit means you have some money. See, deficit doesn't mean you're broke. Deficit means you have less than you should have. So I said, let's focus on the money that we do have, not as much the deficit during these debates, and tell them we're going to have to re-engineer some of these dollars or reappropriate them to get some fair sharing out of this. And that's the way you have to look at government. Now, I lose a lot of the battles, but I do fight and I try to raise conscience about these kinds of things that we should be looking at in government. And that's why some people said that the legislature prefer I just disappear, because even when I can't get anything done, I'm kind of dangerous in my conversation of educating my colleagues, particularly in the Black caucus.
Well, I look forward to those conversations, and I look forward to the action. Thank you.
Thank you.